In November 2011, we returned to the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust in Kenya. This time, we were joined by our daughter Sean and her husband Michael. We began our visit by attending the orphans' midday feeding and mud bath at the Trust Nursery. Once each orphan had consumed 3 bottles of Dame Daphne Sheldrick's special formula, which they receive every 4 hours, it was time for the mud bath. These toddlers were a little bigger than the babies we had seen during past visits, and their idea of a good mud bath includes some pushing and shoving. But this is usually done with no malice and is just part of having a good time. Now that the visiting hour was over, orphans and keepers were headed for the bush, but we would return later to join them.
Yeah.
Right.
And they also like to suck on our fingers.
Yeah.
That makes them feel comfortable.
It's like a pacifier.
Like a
almost,
pacifier.
right? Yeah.
Seeing these toddlers enjoying their time in the bush, it's easy to forget that they are still dealing with the loss of their mother and families. Many of them also had injuries and health issues when they arrived and are still recovering and healing, although not all of them survived the trauma. After spending the afternoon browsing, playing as well as scratching, the mini herd became a little restless, eager to return to the stalls where their bottles were waiting for them. Finally, the group of older orphans also returned from the bush. However, one young bull strongly objected to the delay in receiving his bottle, and he also didn't seem to care for the assigned accommodations.
That's a naughty boy. Oh, he's very trouble.
Once the naughty boy received his bottles, he calmed down and along with everyone else settled in for the night. The keepers rolled out their beds hoping to get 4 hours of sleep before being woken by their charges who would demand to be fed again. So we took our cue and left to get some sleep as well. For the next morning we would join them in the bush once more.
Such a big rumble for such a little one. I'm used to the big rumbles, but that's impressive.
The little one?
Yeah. Big rumble.
The maternal instinct to nurture and protect babies was quite evident amongst the females, despite the fact that they themselves are merely toddlers. Having lost their elephant families, the keepers are the orphan's substitute human family and are extremely important to their well-being. The keepers stay with the orphans round the clock, but look after a different orphan each day to prevent too much attachment to just one human. Although each orphan knows all the keepers, Sometimes an orphan will show its affection for a particular one. The orphans are transferred to the Trust Maue and Ithumba rehabilitation centers in Tsavo only once they are psychologically and physically stable and are at least 2 years old. However, before they take their long road trip, they have to get used to entering the truck, so when the big day comes, there are no delays. The keepers travel with them to provide the comfort of familiar faces, and once they arrive in Tsavo, the orphans receive a joyous greeting from their orphan friends who preceded them there. The next morning, our foursome would also transfer to Tsavo, but first we wanted to spend our last afternoon at the nursery with our friends in the bush. A tiny baby was shadowed by its self-appointed guardian. Some worked on their dusting skills, but altogether, the orphans seemed to simply enjoy a lazy afternoon. The following day, we flew to Tsavo Park East to meet some of the nursery's graduates. During the day, they are in the bush browsing, while at night, they're in stockades to protect them from predators. Still milk-dependent for a year, they regularly emerge from the bush to claim their bottles.
Higher. Okay, that's it.
We spend the next 3 days in the company of orphans and keepers. Truly an unforgettable experience. Spending time with the orphans in their natural habitat and witnessing the close bonds between them and their affection for the keepers, well, that was quite a privilege.
Which way are they going?
When we arrived at the stockade the next morning, we found several ex-orphans standing outside the gate. They were waiting to accompany their friends, who were still finishing their bottles, on their morning excursion into the bush. Perhaps nothing is more telling of how trusting and fond the ex-orphans are of their former keepers than when wild living females bring their wild-born babies to introduce them to their human family. This has happened several times now, and it is absolutely unthinkable with wild elephants. This little bull is called Ololo, but the keepers call him All Alone because he doesn't join the others. He does, however, have the protection of a female who comes to his side whenever he calls.
On the trunk. Oh, here she goes. What's that done? Very pretty, eh?
The orphans spend the afternoon following their usual routine, emerging from the bush to receive their bottles of formula, getting a fresh coat of dust, and then loitering about until the keepers guided them back into the woods and later to the safety of the stockades. Soon, some of the older ones will join wild herds or form splinter groups that start to live and stay in the wild. While they will often return to visit their friends and human family, they will spend most of their time without the protection of the keepers. Like everyone at the Sheldrick Trust, we worry about their survival, for ivory poaching has increased so enormously that in November 2012, the Kenyan government asked the U.S. to send Marines to train the Kenyan Wildlife Service in armed combat. But we also need to raise the public's awareness of the escalating slaughter and the real possibility of losing all of Africa's elephants until it becomes no longer acceptable to own or sell anything made of ivory. For as Dame Daphne Sheldrick stated, saving wildlife and wilderness is the responsibility of all thinking people. Greed and personal gain must not be permitted to decimate, despoil, and destroy the Earth's irreplaceable treasure. For its existence is essential to the human spirit and the well-being of the Earth as a whole. All life has just one home, the Earth, and we as the dominant species must take care of it. To which I will simply add, Amen. I'm John Kay for the Maue Foundation.